Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Jeremy Sharp. This is the Testing Psychologist podcast, episode number 6. Hello again, and welcome to the Testing Psychologist podcast. I'm Dr. Jeremy Sharp. Hope y'all are doing well. Things are looking good here in Fort Collins. We've had a couple days of really sunny weather, and it's actually been a little warmer than usual. The downside of that is in Colorado, when it gets warm, it usually means that there is a pretty strong wind as well, especially in the winter. So we were outside, finally got our kids out yesterday to burn off some energy, but had to brave the wind while we were doing so. Either way, I will take it. So we're going to be talking today about technology. Anybody who knows me can probably name, 2 or 3 things that I am pretty interested in. One is running. If I haven't talked about running yet, I definitely will at many points in the future. But the other is technology. So I love technology. I've always loved technology and researching technology and figuring out how it can be useful and where to integrate it in my life and that kind of thing. So that definitely translates well over to testing. When I was in grad school, I was the assistant director of our department clinic, our community clinic. And back then, even, I was so interested in technology. We were, like a lot of grad programs, we had to videotape our sessions and play them back, for supervision. And it was, I think, my 3rd or 4th year in grad school, and I was like, what in the world are we doing? We're still using VHS tapes, and so I'm proud to say that my legacy from being in grad school here at CSU was transitioning our clinic from VHS to internet recording and, live streaming video. So, love technology for a long time. Technology is important here in reports and testing because there are a lot of really cool tools out there that make testing a lot easier and a lot more convenient. So we're going to be talking about a few different things. I'm going to talk about EHR systems and how those can be helpful. I'm going to talk about report writing software. I'm going to talk about some individual tools to help you when you're writing your reports and making your tables, dictation software, grammar, proofreading software, things like that. And we'll also talk a little bit about digital record storage, how to go paperless, and I will spend a little bit of time also on Q Interactive, which is kind of a cool thing. If you haven't seen it, Q Interactive is an iPad-based interface that has come out over the last few years that allows you to administer and score tests on the iPads. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So let's dive into things. I'm going to start just by talking a little bit about EHR and how that can be helpful for you. So EHR, it stands for Electronic Health Record. Now, there's a lot we can get into in terms of how to evaluate an EHR. I think that's kind of beyond the scope of this podcast, but I will say there are some really cool resources for evaluating EHR systems over at Person Centered Tech. We will have a link to that in the show notes. But for our purposes here, I'm just going to talk generally about how an EHR can be really helpful for you, even for testing-based practices. So when I was first starting out, again, I love technology, so I was looking for an EHR pretty quickly. I ended up settling on Therapy Notes. So Therapy Notes is one of the more popular EHR systems. We'll definitely include a link to that in the show notes. But the reason that I went with Therapy Notes is because they had some, what I consider pretty cool features, specifically for testing folks right out of the gate. One thing that I really liked is that their note template for psych testing was really comprehensive. It breaks it down by domain of test and makes you enter the amount of time that you spent on that particular test, makes you enter the amount of time that you spent on your report writing, and it totals it all up for you. So when you look at the interface, it has intelligence tests, academic tests, neuropsych tests, other measures, things like that. So you can enter every test that you do and really account for the time that you spend, which is pretty important if you're billing insurance. I've gotten requests from insurance companies to look at the records, and in some cases that's appropriate, and they really benefit from having a documentation of how much time you spent on each measure. So that's why I like therapy notes. Back then, I was also doing a group, and they had really, I think, clear functionality for group therapy. So that drew me to them as well. Now, Simple Practice is another EHR option. I think it's really popular. You can kind of do your research, and of course, there are many others out there too. I don't mean to say it's just those two, but you can do your research. A great site to research EHR systems for mental health is Capterra. Again, I'll have a link there in the show notes where you can check it out and read all the reviews for all these different software options and try to get a good idea of what would work best for you. But the general reasons I like an EHR, one, I think it helps a lot with billing insurance, again, because it helps you document your time, and that can be really important. Also because it just streamlines the billing process in terms of sending statements, scheduling your testing. I use mine to do credit card processing as well. So I think this is pretty important with testing. I think a lot of us have, hopefully, a pretty well-defined cancellation policy. And so having the credit card stored right there in therapy notes lets me charge that credit card if there's a no-show or a cancellation, and it just happens smoothly like that. And that makes things easier. You don't have to chase people down and collect late fees or cancellation fees. So those are some of the benefits just as you consider an EHR system. Again, you can do your own research and kind of figure out what works best for you, but I do know that there is a promo code for therapy notes if you choose to go that route. Now, when we get into the actual report writing, I think this is the place that a lot of us would love to have technology working for us. So there are a lot of options here. There are some options out there, certainly, that I would call full report writing software, where often there is, I would just say, a pretty thorough, comprehensive setup period where you communicate with the software designers, and they kind of tailor your report template to your practice. And once you get all the details kind of input into the report writing software and into the program, then it serves as kind of a master template where you then can go in and input the information that you collect during the testing process. So the ones that I've demoed, and I'll be honest, I don't use a full report writing software system at this point, but I've demoed a few. The ones that I see, they are pretty comprehensive, but they require quite a bit of work on the front end. If any of you have experience with others, I would love to hear about that. But the ones that I've seen so far, one is called the Psych Writer. A lot of folks that I've run into use the Myers system. There's one called InsightFill, one called PsychScreen. Anyway, so there are a lot of options out there. Again, I'll have links to those in the show notes for you to kind of check it out yourself. But the general idea is that you purchase a software. Often there's a bulk purchasing option where you pay by the report, but have to buy in bulk. So you might buy like a batch of 20 or 50 reports. And they work with you on the front end to set up all the variables, all the information that you like to have in your report. And then they kind of custom build a master template for you. So then once you're done with the testing or with your interview or with your feedback, whatever it might be, you go in and there is usually some variety of drop-down menus where all you have to do is kind of click check boxes or choose options from drop-downs right there in the software. And then once you have done all that and input all the data that you have, there's a master button at the end where you hit submit, and then it generates this like beautiful written report that has all of your information in it, and it looks like a report that you wrote from scratch. So if that appeals to you, like I said, definitely check those out and do some research and see if that would be an appropriate option for you. Now, I did not go that route. I think ultimately, when I really put in the energy to research some of these, which was, let's say, a couple years ago, maybe a year ago, I just found that they weren't quite flexible enough for me. With the kind of the templated nature, like I said, it just wasn't quite flexible enough. I didn't feel like I had, quite enough control over it. And it's in my experience, not one of those things that I could just go in and change kind of on the fly because they had coded the software already. That may have changed, but that's why I stayed away originally. Now, what I do at this point is I write my reports right now in Microsoft Word, and I use a combination of tools available both within Word and outside of Word to really help me with that. So I think like a lot of us, I have put together a report template that has all the main elements. I also have templates for recommendations, and those can be just inserted into the report as needed. But one of the most helpful tools that I have used is basically an autocorrect option or a text expander kind of option. Now, what these do at the base level is let you type in a very short snippet of text, and then that expands into a much longer, detailed piece of text. So, for example, something or a phrase that I use a lot in my reports is kind of like a summary of the type of evaluation, right? So a sentence that says something like, this full neuropsychological evaluation was aimed at providing appropriate diagnoses and treatment recommendations for so-and-so. So instead of typing that sentence out every single time in every report, I created a little auto expander where if I type : full eval, it automatically autocorrects to that full sentence. So you can do this right in Microsoft. If you're in the Word window, you can go up to the Tools option, and there should be an autocorrect choice on that menu. And if you click autocorrect, then I think it's pretty self-explanatory. There are a couple windows where it says replace blank with blank, and you just fill those in. And that can really shorten the writing time, especially if you have, like I said, sentences that you kind of write over and over and over. Now, I'd say the next step up from that is using software that allows you to kind of do a hybrid between a full report writing software and just a simple kind of autocorrect. So one piece of software that works really well for that is something called Text Expander. This has been around for a long time, primarily for the Mac, but they've also expanded to Windows. And there are some other options too, but Text Expander is really just I think probably the most well-known version of this. But what that does is it basically allows you to create what they call snippets. And snippets are basically those short versions of text that act as shortcuts to create longer versions. Now, the cool thing about Text Expander is that it allows you to actually create your own templates. So that's why I say it's kind of like a hybrid with the report writing software that I talked about earlier. So with Text Expander, it's a mouthful, you can create longer snippets. You can also create bigger paragraphs. You can create drop-down menus and checkboxes. And if you want, there are a couple different ways that you can program it to output. So the kind of default output is that it just generates a text file, which looks fine. It's totally fine. You can do bold and formatting and italics and headings and that kind of thing. But if you're willing to put in a fair amount of work on the front end, you can also have it generate a file that will open in Microsoft Word, and that can be really helpful. Like I said, it takes a little bit more work on the front end, but definitely doable. So you have a couple options just for text. And those have been super helpful for me. That cuts out a lot of time when you're, especially with those kind of phrases and paragraphs that you just type over and over and over. I'll be honest, I still haven't been able to get comfortable with any sort of templated interpretation. It seems like my interpretations end up fairly personalized and fairly unique for each client. Even if I'm discussing the same kind of presenting concerns or diagnostic impressions, I always end up writing them just slightly different, based on the client. So that part is fairly immune to shortcuts, at least for me, but that might be different for you. Now, some other pretty simple software options. A lot of people use Excel to make a table formatter where you can input the scores and write a little bit of, I guess you'd call it code in Excel, where it transfers and converts the scores to standard scores and maybe percentiles and ranges. There are a lot of options out there. I think it's fairly easy to do on your own as well. But if you are looking for one, I'll have a link in the show notes to another psychologist out there, Joel Schneider. He has actually several self-made tools that can help with report writing, but his table formatter is just an option you can look at as kind of an example of how to do that. So again, just another piece of software that can help eliminate a little time for you. Now, a lot of folks also use dictation software. I imagine you probably heard of this, but there are a few options for dictating. It's actually gotten a lot easier over the years. It used to be that you had to use a pretty formal piece of software like Dragon. So Dragon has an option for medical terminology that could really help, especially if you're in a hospital setting or if you just happen to use a lot of medical terminology in your reports. There is a medical module that would probably help a lot with that. Now, if you have a Mac, and I'll be honest, it's just going to come up over and over and over. I'm highly biased toward Macs. I love Macs. That presents a little bit of trouble with scoring software sometimes that is only for Windows. But we do have a PC in the office, but I prefer Mac for pretty much everything I do personally. So with Macs, there is built-in dictation in your system settings. So if you go to system settings, you should just be able to search dictation or speech, and it will come up, and you can turn that on, and it's pretty good. Definitely helps if you have a microphone, but that's an option. So it's it's a free option, and it works fairly well. Some folks I know will use their smartphone to record and then dictate their interviews. So there are quite a few options for dictation software as well. Now, if you want to kind of take it to the next level, there are a couple tools out there that can transcribe, is that the right word? Convert your dictated speech into searchable text, or even convert your handwriting into searchable text. So smart pens are an option there. So if you're in your interview, if you still like to take handwritten notes like I do, you can take your handwritten notes with a smart pen. So this is paper and pen system that often will have a voice recorder in the pen, and then you use paper that has I think has microchips in it. It sounds like magic as far as I'm concerned, but you take the notes with the pen, goes onto the special paper, and then you can transfer that via the computer to software on your computer, and it will convert that to handwritten notes, and it also, convert it to searchable notes, and it will also allow you to record what was being said in the interview and sync that with the notes you were taking right at that point in time. So you can go back and tap on the microchip paper, and it will play back what was being said at that time when you were taking those notes, which is really cool. Another app that is in the same ballpark is an app called Notability, and there are others too, but these are just the ones that I know of the most. And again, these are apps that just sync spoken information with written or typed notes, and you can always upload those notes to the computer, and then they're searchable, and they turn into like a Word document or a text document. So lots of options for actually writing the report or getting your notes into a searchable format and putting all of that together. A lot of folks I know will just dictate the interview right after they do it, and that tends to save quite a bit of time rather than typing everything out themselves. Now, once you get the report written, I think it's fair to say that all of us, hopefully are using a template of some sort, but when you use a template, of course, the risk that comes with that is that you're going to make mistakes, that you may forget pronouns, forget to switch pronouns, or maybe even leave a name in there, something like that. One little thing that I did way back when was just in my master template, instead of copying and pasting from one client to another, which some folks do, I just made a master template where I can substitute gender-specific pronouns and use the kind of general terms first name and last name, so I can just do a substitution right at the beginning of the report when I write those. Pretty simple, but helps a lot. So once you get your report put together and you think you're ready to proofread it and send it out, I've gotten pretty interested in proofreading and grammar software. I think the spell check and the grammar check on Word are decent at best. And so there are some other tools that can really do a better job. Grammarly, I think, is probably the most popular one. It seems to have the widest application in terms of, there's a Google Chrome browser extension, so it tends to work in most text fields that you're typing in on the internet. So email, blog posts, things like that. It also works on Windows and works on Mac, although I don't think it works on Word on Mac. So that's something to consider. But Grammarly is really good. It, I think, does a much better job at proofreading than just your standard Word proofreader. Another one that's pretty similar is called Style Writer. There's another one called Ginger. So there are a few tools out there that I think are definitely worth looking into if you're interested in grammar and proofreading, which you should be. I think a well-written, well-proofread report is one of the most powerful marketing tools that you can have as a testing psychologist. And yeah, those tools can help quite a bit. So let's talk just a little bit about digital record storage. If you've been testing for any amount of time, you know that the files can be enormous. So each of those testing files, if you're doing a pretty big battery, can end up being an inch or inch and a half thick, and that adds up. So I think I got to the point where I had 25 banker boxes full of files. And I finally was like, we got to do something about this. This is terrible. I'm running out of space. My office looks terrible. And so I really looked into the option of digital record storage. So a lot of folks have been doing this for a while, but I was a little late to jump on the bandwagon with this. But it has made such a huge difference just in terms of being able to search through records, being able to find things easily, and of course, decluttering the office, which is awesome. So one thing that you got to keep in mind with any digital record storage is HIPAA. Make sure that whatever service you use, they are willing to sign a HIPAA business associate agreement. And I should back up a little bit just to say that I am talking primarily about cloud-based services. Now, there are EHR services that can that have electronic record storage, of course. I prefer to go with Google Drive only because we have all of our email accounts through Google Drive, and I just kind of run everything through Google for the most part. And so it made a lot of sense to integrate our records with Google Drive as well, because you can insert files and search and share and all of that pretty easily. So to have Google Drive be HIPAA compliant, you do have to upgrade to their business version. It's a pretty nominal fee each month, and they will sign a business associate agreement. I believe Microsoft OneDrive will do as well, but that's just something to consider if you're thinking about digital records. If you're interested at all in guidelines around HIPAA and digital records and that sort of thing, there are a lot of really cool resources over at Person Centered Tech, website that really specializes in technology for mental health professionals. And I will have a link to that in the show notes so that you can check that out. But for us, the combination of Google Drive and a really good scanner has just made a huge difference. So I'll put in just a quick plug for it's the ScanSnap IX500 is the scanner we use. It's a super quick, double-sided, very easy to use scanner. It goes really fast, and the software integrates really well with both Mac and PC. It's wireless, so a lot of people in the office can use it. And I think it's been vetted pretty well by a lot of psychologists and neuropsychologists out there. I've gotten a lot of pretty good feedback from others around it too. So that's our setup. We use Google Drive with the business associate agreement and the ScanSnap IX500. And there will be a link to that also in the show notes to get it on Amazon if you're interested. And that has helped a lot. Now we can search our records. Anybody can access them. I don't have to paw through these paper files, and it is just so much more convenient. Now, just a word about what records you would actually scan in with testing. I've heard people kind of go both ways, but I take more of a comprehensive approach where I will scan in every testing record that we have. So, we cut the test booklets up the middle and just, we scan every page of the test booklets. For the forms that have carbon, like say the brief or maybe a CARS or something like that, where, you have the two layers, we scan both the kind of answer layer and the scoring layer. So that's just a word on that. If you were to ever need those that raw data or those records, we just, scan it all in just to be sure. So I would be totally remiss to not talk about Q Interactive. I think Q Interactive is arguably one of the more important technology advances for testing over the past few years. So like I said earlier, I'm a huge fan of technology. So I jumped on the Q Interactive bandwagon really early. I mean, as soon as I could be fairly certain that the test retest or the reliability between paper tests and Q Interactive was solid, I started to use it. I think a big part of it was I just wanted to buy 2 iPads to be able to play with them, but the convenience was attractive. So the whole idea with Q Interactive is that you use 2 iPads that end up linked together. So you have to buy 2 iPads to run this system, but they communicate with one another, and they basically serve as the interface between you and the client. And again, we'll have a link to Q Interactive in the show notes so that you can check out what it's all about and read a little bit more and everything. But the general idea, is that these iPads will be the interface between you and the client. And it's kind of amazing. They have the option to do many tests on the iPad. The WISC, the WACE, DCAF, SNPC, WIPC, the CVLT, the KTEA, the Wyatt, and even some others. So there are a lot of options for fairly major tests. I think it's worth a trial, or I would certainly look around and kind of talk with other folks who use it. We eventually moved away from the iPads, really for a couple things. There are some downsides to being an early adopter, and the downside for me is that early on the software was fairly buggy, and we were just running into I think quite a few issues with just administration. It wasn't as smooth. That has definitely gotten better over the years. One of the big things for us too is that the scoring output from the iPads just was not the same as I was used to from, say, the WACE or the WISC scoring program, like through PsycCorp Center. But that has also changed. So they're definitely getting a lot better with that. But the other thing that turned us off was the cost. I think that using Q Interactive is good for folks who maybe do less volume in testing. Their cost structure is that you pay an annual license, which gets you a certain number of tests. That ranges from $225 to $300, depending on how many tests you want access to. And then they charge per subtest. So it's about $1.50 each. They do bulk discounts once you get above a certain number of subtests a year. But so, for a whisk that has 10 subtests on it, it's going to cost you about $15 plus the cost of a booklet. So if you do the math, I think the idea is that it would be more cost effective for someone who doesn't want to buy the full test kit, which can run up, $1,300 or so. And granted this could be off, but with the cost of the subtest plus the test booklet, I think that balances out at about 50 or 60 administrations. So yeah, if you would see yourself doing less than that over the course of a couple years or 3 years, then it might be a good choice for you. But we just went ahead, we bought the full paper kits because we just do a lot of volume of testing, and it was more cost effective. But yeah, I think Q Interactive is a really good choice for folks who maybe aren't doing quite as much testing. So you can do some research and check that out. It definitely makes things easier. The advantages are that it scores on the fly, as quickly as you can enter the scores. For the subtest, it will score it on the fly, so you can make pretty quick decisions about adding or modifying your battery if you need to. And it's also, it takes out the human error of scoring. So that's kind of cool. I will say that I found it to be super helpful, in particular on the CVLT. Some of you out there will probably be familiar with just the tedium of administering that test and even using that scoring software where you have to type in the words. It's really nice on the iPads. You just tap the words as the individual says them. And, of course, you have occasional times where you have to write in your own words, but it's, it works really well. And that's probably the one where I've found the biggest advantage so far. So that's just a little summary of Q Interactive. Like I said, you can check it out. And my hope is that I will have some folks on from Q Interactive who can do a nice interview with us and really talk about the ins and outs of Q Interactive here sometime in the future. So that's my primer on technology in testing. Now, there are a lot of other options out there, I'm sure, a lot of software that I didn't even mention. Would love to hear from you if there are particular tools that you really enjoy or things that are worth checking out. Like I said, I love technology, and I will continue to explore technology in the testing world. All right. Thanks for listening today, everybody. I have a couple of really cool interviews coming up in future episodes. I'm going to be talking with Jen Knope, a local therapist, who's going to talk with us about how assessment is valuable to a therapist and what therapists might be looking for in reports and assessments. I have an interview with Joe Sanok from Practice of the Practice. He's going to talk with us about basic business and how to slow down and make the most of your time. And I'll be talking with Dr. Amy Connery from Denver Children's Hospital about validity testing and performance testing in kids and how to make the transition from being a regular psychologist to a neuropsychologist. As always, we have a few resources for you. Definitely check out the website and the blog if you are more of a reader and like to get your info that way. The website is thetestingpsychologist.com. If you're interested in taking some really concrete steps to build your testing practice, you can always sign up and download the 4-week blueprint. That's at thetestingpsychologist.com/4-week blueprint. And by doing that, you'll get a weekly email every week for the next 4 weeks with several action items that'll really help you take some concrete, clear steps toward building your testing practice. And if you're interested in connecting with other psychologists and people doing testing, you can always check out our Facebook community. That's at the Testing Psychologist Community. You can search for that on Facebook in that top bar. and it's growing by the day. We're having some good discussion about testing and resources and all sorts of good stuff. So check that out if you want to jump in. As always, thanks for listening. Here in the beginning stages, it's super important. It'd be a huge favor if you enjoy it, subscribe, rate, maybe review the podcast, and we will continue to grow. Thank you. Talk to you next time.